training wound by applying direct pressure, tying a bandage. Who here has experienced that? Okay, and who here has been asked, so what was your biggest takeaway, or what was one thing that you learned from today, or what is one thing that you think we can improve from today? Anyone? Have your NCOs and your officers or teachers been seeking this kind of feedback from you? Okay, I see one or two hands. Okay, so fear not if you have not been through that. We are going to go through what facilitation is today, and we're going to go through what debriefing is today. But basically, the example that I just brought up, that is in itself a kind of facilitation and a kind of debriefing. And we have also briefly come across this topic last week when we were going through the program planning lecture. Anyone want to hazard a guess which part of program planning might facilitating and debriefing come handy? So remember that in your program planning, you have the before phase, the during phase, and the after phase. Anyone want to hazard a guess? Is it the before phase, the during phase, or the after phase that facilitation and debriefing becomes useful? You can just type it in the chat if you don't want to unmute yourself and speak. No? No one? Okay, it's all right. So we will go through this later on during the lecture. But as I mentioned to you, most of the times during certain lessons or after certain activities, we'll always go through this kind of process, right? People will ask you for their feedback. People will ask you, what have you learned today? People will ask you, what's the most memorable experience? Things like that. And whether we know it or not, these are all part of facilitation. And I'm sure sometimes when you commit a mistake, for example, you can't do math homework, right? You did the homework wrongly, and then your teacher will ask you, do you know why you're wrong here? Do you know what step did you mess up? It was here where you're supposed to add, but you multiplied or something like that. That in itself is also kind of facilitation. So what facilitation and debriefing is all about? It's about helping you and helping others learn from certain experiences and certain things that they have done. And I'll go on to elaborate that. But what's very important here and what we are here to learn is how do we go about doing that? Okay, so as NCOs, you're going to guide your juniors, right? You're going to guide your cadets, and you want them to learn from their mistakes. You want them to learn from their experiences. So there's a certain structure where we can follow. There's a certain template where we can follow, where we can facilitate their learning and help them be improving from whatever they have done. So there's many ways that facilitation can take place. But what we are going to focus on today is debriefing. Okay, and I will go through what debriefing is about later on as well in my slides. So by the end of this module, you should be able to understand certain things and apply certain things. First, like I've mentioned, we need to understand what is debriefing and why is it so important. Secondly, we're going to understand how do people learn, because only from there, then we can understand how does debriefing fit into the overall picture, how does facilitation fit into the overall picture. And to do that, we obviously need to know what a facilitator does and what a debrief session might look like. And of course, like I said, there will be a framework, and then to help us with that, there will be some tools that we can use. And along the way, perhaps you realize that in this course, we have been using various tools to help facilitate your learning through various activities during our lectures and lessons. Okay. So now let's dive into the importance of debriefing. Let's go down to the basics of what is debriefing. So debriefing is basically learning, but instead of just learning like headlessly and without any direction, we are being structured about it. Okay. So all the examples we went through just now, they are just learning processes that we go through. We want to understand what happens to each person or each team. So for example, just now when you were going through your scavenger hunt activity and then your facilitator comes in. So your facilitator is actually facilitating your learning. right? After that activity, we talk to you. So what stage do you think you're at? Are you at forming, storming, norming, or performing? Okay, and we try to relate what you have just experienced to what you have just learned during the lecture, and that in itself is a form of debrief. Okay, what we are doing during this lecture now is to understand and think about, hey, actually, what did my facilitator just do? Okay, how am I going to do it for my cadets next time when I'm an NCO? Okay, so when we are debriefing this, like I mentioned to you, you look back at the experience and then you understand, oh, actually this experience, why does it happen? Okay, and you want to explore, knowing why does it happen, how can we improve things from here? And that's essentially what debriefing is about, right? We want to understand, given a certain event, why does something happen? And once we understand why does it happen, we want to know how can we improve next time. So throughout this process, we know that debriefs, a lot of time, many a times, we ask questions, right? Your facilitators have been asking you many questions, asking you, what do you feel? How do you think? What do you think? How does this relate to your lecture, right? And when we are asking you questions and when you are thinking, right, it allows you to reflect on a certain learning experience that you have, okay? And then this can help you to identify strengths and weaknesses in yourself or your teams. But more importantly, from these strengths and weaknesses, we can identify opportunities where we can improve and do better next time. So there are many occasions where we can conduct debriefs. Just now I asked you, during program planning, what is a stage where we might want to conduct the debrief? So just type in the chat, what stage do you think it is? For example, right now you are doing your assessment. You're preparing for your assessment, right? You're planning a certain activity. Okay. When do you think a debrief will happen for that activity? As you're planning, you might arrange a certain time for it in your work plan, for example. Anyone can guess? After the program, good. Thank you, Corinne. Anyone else? Do you all agree with Corinne about after the program? If you do, just raise your hands. Okay, thank you, Hwang. At the end of all the activities. Yes, that's right. So what is the technical term for that? What's the technical term? After CCA, yes. Thank you, Braden. So in the context of program planning, is there a technical term? Is there a yes, that's right. After action review. So after the action review, where we ask what went right, what went wrong, why did things go right, why did things go wrong, how do we improve next time, how do we avoid mistakes? That in itself is a debrief. It's a debrief of our entire planning and execution process. And that is what I mean here on my first point on project management. Debriefs help us reflect on the progress that we make, so we can improve the next time. So that's on a very zoomed out scale, okay, a very abstract scale. But at each point during your program planning, maybe you have certain meetings, maybe you have certain dry runs, right? Then that's where we can also conduct debriefs. We can think about what have we done so far and how are we going to improve. And if you draw a comparison, every time we have a certain activity, like the activity that you just experienced just now, the one that we'll do scavenger hunt, activities that you experienced last week, where we went through certain elements of program planning and presentation, we will also usually conduct summaries and debriefs after each activity. And you should notice by now, or you may have noticed by now, that it's a common theme. After every time we do something, then your facilitators will come in and talk, ask you questions. So that in itself is the debrief. And this is what we are learning. How do we pick up the role of a facilitator and do that for our cadets next time? Okay, so now we have briefly gone through what a debrief is, when do we do debriefs. Now I want you to understand how these debriefs help you learn. Okay, why is it important, and basically what is it all about. So long time ago, there's this guy called David Cook. Okay, he realized that learning takes 4 steps. Okay, he realized that learning takes 4 steps. For us to learn, we need to experience something. After we experience that one thing, we need to think about it. We need to reflect. We need to reflect about it. after we reflect about it, we need to think, oh, so what does this mean to me? We need to conceptualize why do things happen? What does it mean that things happen? Then we will pick out the lessons and then we go and try again. We're going to do another experiment. So we're going to say that, oh, maybe this time I talk too much. Next time I'm going to try to keep quiet. Or it's like cooking. Maybe this time I added a bit too much sugar. Next time I'm going to add a little bit less sugar. And that is where we go to step 4, active experimentation. And then we try again. So every time we do something, we think about what happens, and then we think what we're going to do next, and then we try, and then basically it goes on and on again. If these terms look too cheap, too complicated for you, don't worry. I have dumped it down for you. And this is what we're going to focus today, right? We got this is what we're going to focus today. Firstly, we need to ask ourselves what happened during something. Something has happened, we want to ask ourselves, what did we just experience? What happened? Then we're going to ask, so this thing happened, just now when I was eating, I put too much soy sauce on my food. So what does this mean? This means that my food become very salty. Why did I do that? Because I thought that the food was a bit bland. So now what am I going to do? Next time I eat the same thing, I'm going to put less soy sauce. Now I'm going to try. Now I'm going to ask myself, now is there enough soy sauce? Right? So we just go through this cycle. And essentially, this whole comparison that I just did is the same as what we're going to do with facilitation and the same as what we're going to do with debriefing. We're going to ask ourselves, given a certain one thing, what does it mean? Why do we do it? What are we going to do next time? Okay. So I've just asked you, I've just given you a very clear example, I think, of what debriefing might be about. So now on this slide, there's 4 steps here, 1, 2, 3, and 4. As a facilitator or as a facilitator to be, which steps do you think facilitating is and debriefing is relevant to? You can just type your comments in the chat. You think it's 1, 2, 3, and 4? You think it's 1, 2, 3, 2 and 3, 2 and 4? What do you think it is? Okay, Corinne, steps 1, 2, and 3. Anyone else? Come. Just now I see when the Donald Trump come out, the broccoli come out, the runner come out, so many comments. How come now so quiet? 1 and 2. 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3. Okay. Okay, I guess that's all the response I'm getting. Right. So remember what I said. When you're debriefing, you are looking out for, number 1, something that's happened, right? Number 2, why did it happen? What does it mean to me when it's happened? And number 3, what are we going to do for now? So this corresponds nicely to steps 1, 2, and 3. Okay. So debriefing basically, as a facilitator that is going through a debrief, very simply, what we're going to do here is going to help our participants, our cadets, go through the process of 1, 2, and 3. That is the job of the facilitator, or rather, that's the main job of the facilitator during a debrief. Okay, I repeat, the main job of a facilitator during a debrief is to help our participants and our cadets go through steps 1, 2, and 3, where they firstly reflect on something that has, or rather, firstly, they recall what has happened, then they reflect on what has happened, and they think, what am I going to do in the future? And then as a facilitator, you let them do it. Okay? So during the debrief, we're going to focus on steps 1, 2, and 3, and we'll come back to this later. Okay? So now I'm going to teach you officially what are the steps to be a facilitator. How do you do that? Okay. And at this point, I just want to remind you that whatever I'm teaching you now, or whatever I'm going to go through in the future, in the coming slides, is not limited to just giving debriefs. Okay. It's going to be a process that you can use over and over again when we are facilitating anything. When I say anything, it can be your schoolwork. It can be like when your parents can decide what to have for dinner. It can be like when your sibling doesn't know what to do with the mess that they created. It can be anything. Okay, but over here today, we are going to focus it in a debriefing context. Okay, so as a facilitator, your role is to identify learning objectives and pose the right questions to achieve these learning objectives. Okay, so I went through just now in the experiential learning cycle. Remember the 4 steps of complicated things that I told you that I simplified to the questions. That is called the experiential learning cycle. Okay, and from that, from this slide, we know that learning involves asking the right questions. Okay, we need to ask the right questions for us to reflect. Okay, so as a facilitator, we need to know what is our end goal. Today, I want to facilitate a debrief regarding my first aid lesson. All right, I'm going to ask questions so that my participants can reach that end goal. That's step number 1 for a facilitator. Number 2, in order for me to do that, I need to make sure that everyone is comfortable. I need to make sure that whenever I ask questions, people are comfortable to share. And that's about creating a conducive and inclusive learning environment. Okay, and there are 2 aspects to this. Number 1 is the physical environment that we are creating. Okay, it means that as a facilitator, you want to set a good location. Okay, if you are doing this in person, you don't want to find a busy, noisy spot to do a facilitation or a debrief, because you'll be shouting at each other. You can't hear each other. That's not conducive. People get distracted. Right? Right now, we are doing this on Zoom. You're in the comfort of your own homes, and everyone's on mute. That makes a semi-conducive environment because we don't get interruptions from each other. That's number 1. The second aspect to creating a conducive and inclusive environment is more of a cultural ground rule kind of thing, right? We want to make sure that when we are sharing, we are comfortable sharing. If I'm going to say something that I'm already uncomfortable saying, for example, I want to say, Darryl, sir, actually, your lesson kind of sucks, right? I want to make sure that when I say that comment, right, it's taken positively instead of it coming off as an offensive remark, right? And that's where it's important to be conducive and inclusive. We want to make sure that everyone here, we understand that we are here to learn, right? Make it a comfortable environment to share your honest opinions, because if I tell you what you want to hear, then you're obviously not going to improve, right? If my lesson sucks now, and then you just tell me, oh, actually, your lesson very good, also very good, very good. I like it a lot. Then I'm forever never going to improve, right? So we want to create an environment so that people can share honestly. And finally, as a facilitator, you also want to ensure that whatever you are going through today, whatever people tell you today, they follow up, right? We have references to that. It's like taking meeting minutes, remember? So we want to make sure that everything, all the actions they want to do, all the outcomes they want to learn from, they're all properly recorded. So these are the 3 roles of a facilitator, okay? Remember, these are the 3 roles. This is what a facilitator is going to do, okay? Now I'm going to tell you how to do it. And I've summarized this in this cycle over here. There are 5 steps. Number 1, preparation work, as you can see on the top left. Then we go through this cycle. We want to clarify the debrief objectives. Remember, we want to know what we are facilitating. Number 2, and 2 is kind of an optional step. I'll explain a bit more later on, but it's kind of an optional step. We want to use the proper debriefing tool. 2 is like an activity that we may do, for example. Number 3 is 3 steps questioning. At this point, anyone wants to guess what 3 steps are these? Once again, you can type it in the chat or you can unmute yourself. Has there been 3 steps that I've been emphasizing over and over again since I started this lecture about 10 minutes ago? Anyone? What happened? Why happened? How did it go? Good. Thank you, Brandon. Exactly. So those are the 3 steps of questioning that we will go through over and over and over again during a debrief. So the bulk of the debrief is actually step 3. Okay, the bulk of the debrief is just asking those questions over and over and over again. And when we are done, maybe after 30 minutes of talking, then step 4 will come in. We will just, recap whatever we have been talking since the start of the debrief all the way to now. And we want to summarize it so that everyone takes it home. Okay? All right. So this is how are we going to do this. And throughout this entire rest of the lecture, I'm going to use a particular scenario to illustrate this. Okay. So now imagine yourself. Imagine yourself to be a Sec 3 NCO. Okay. Now your NCO, your senior, you're going to have a Sec 2 junior, or rather you have a few Sec 2 juniors who are going to give a lesson on bleeding wounds to your Sec 1 juniors. Okay, so the Sec 2s, they're like, oh, I just become a Sec 2, I learned some things last year. They're going to hold a lesson for your Sec 1s. And your job now is you're going to debrief your Sec 2 juniors on how they have conducted the activity. Okay? Okay. So now I'm going to use this scenario. Whenever I'm talking, my perspective will be I'm a Sec 3 NCO preparing for a debrief for my Sec 2 juniors. Okay? So, step number 1, preparation work. There are 2 steps to this. First, you need to prepare yourself as a facilitator. And secondly, recall our second role as a facilitator. We need to create an environment for our participants. Okay? So, on the first step, preparing yourself, we need to understand the activity or task that you are facilitating. This means that we need to be well equipped with all the information that we need to conduct a debrief. This is like if you're going for a test, you're going to study for the test, right? So it's the same thing here. When you're going for a debrief, you're going to study, you're going to recall what you're going to do during the debrief. So what does this mean in our context here? All right. So if I'm a Sec 3 NCO going to debrief my Sec 2s, I want to prepare myself. I want to know, so what do I expect of a bleeding wound lesson? All right, so in that case, am I going to revise what will I cover in the bleeding lesson, right? And in order for you to debrief your Sec 2s, you will want to be present. You want to observe the activities. You want to observe how your Sec 2s are performing, and you want to record down things. The lesson can be like 1 hour long, 1.5 hour long. Right? There will be so many things that you'll be seeing, so many things that you'll be hearing. And you want to make sure that you write down things to know what you want to raise up later. If you see someone slip up, you see someone say something wrong, like for example, someone said that bleeding, when you have a bleeding wound, you'll see blisters. That will be something that you want to write down so that during the debrief, that's something that you can bring up. Okay? And of course, you want to prepare yourself by recapping what facilitation is about. And when I say that, you basically want to recall all the elements that I'm showing to you here on this slide. Secondly, we want to prepare our participants. And this is basically our second role as a facilitator, conducive learning environment. All right, this means that we have to have a physical setting to hold a debrief. In today's COVID context, maybe that can be over Zoom, right? After the lesson, all the cadets leave, we just stay here for Zoom, stay here on Zoom, and we will do the debrief there. That's a physical location. But importantly, like I said, we want to make sure the environment is comfortable. And to do this, we want to make sure that we tell our participants very clearly that debriefing is not a fault-finding process. It's not a chance for you to air your grievances and say that, wow, I'm not happy with you. I based on you. I don't like your face. I don't like how you did it. I don't like the way you speak. Okay? In a very aggressive, offensive manner, in a way that you mean harm. Rather, debriefing is a environment where we all learn together and we all seek improvement together. Okay? Any questions on this slide? Okay, I don't see many confused faces. I saw some head shaking. I'm going to move on. So now that we have done all preparatory work, now imagine that we are going to the debrief. So now all the Sec 1 cadets have left the room. Now we are just here in the Zoom room, me and my Sec 2s. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clarify my debrief objectives. I want to know what am I going to talk about this time, right? So when we are doing that, we're going to communicate what the debrief will cover. Maybe in this context as a lesson, we're going to cover from preparatory work, the before of the event, to during of the event. And if I'm doing this, this is the after event, and this in itself is a kind of after action review. So just bear in mind that there's a kind of overlap here. There's a program planning aspect where we are conducting the after action review for someone's event, where the event is teaching the Sec 1's lesson, but this is also an activity in itself for the Sec 2's. So don't be confused with that. Just remember that, you know, either way it can apply. But what we want to do here is we want to know what is the scope of the brief. We want to talk about the preparation work, how you did, and how you did during the actual event. So those are what the debrief will cover. And then we also want to talk about like the key activities that the debrief can reflect upon. So you might want to identify the different segments of the lesson, for example. So you have learned before in the MOI lesson, you have like the introduction of the lesson, you have like explanation, you have your demonstration, you have your practice. These are the different segments or different key events within a certain activity that we can use to reflect upon. And once again, we want to emphasize that, you know, at the start of the brief, we want to emphasize that debriefing is not about fault finding. I'm not here to tell you that you suck, right? I'm here to tell you that you did this. I think there might be a better way to do it. Or it can be that you did something well, and I don't want to tell you that you did something well just so that you can feel good about yourself, right? I want to tell you that you did something well because I want to see it again next time. I want you to know that this is good, and this is what I hope they can continue doing over and over again in the future. So that's step one. Usually we spend about like 3 to 5 minutes clarifying what we are going to go through and what we're going to debrief. Step two, using an appropriate debriefing tool, right? Tools are usually a bit more optional, I would say. It depends on what kind of context we are in. Sometimes people are shy, therefore we use tools. I'm going to show you some tools in the next slides. Tools are also useful when certain individuals, they want to talk a lot and you don't want them to talk so much. So you just use tools so that the people who are quieter, who are more shy, they will start talking. Two very brief tools here I'm going to share with you is like think, pair, share, and draw your thoughts. Think, pair, share is probably something that you have definitely went through before, maybe in class when you're young. You pair people up and then they share their thoughts with each other, and then maybe you can pick a pair, get a partner to share what the other person has told you or something. Draw your thoughts is also like an activity they can do, draw something. I think last year during your BNCOC, we did something with the gingerbread man, right? Where you draw out what kind of leadership values you see in a certain someone. That in itself is a draw your thought kind of activity. And the tools are like anything, whatever we have been through today, scavenger hunt, that in itself is also a tool, an activity for you to go through and then think about what you're doing and whatnot. So tools are basically just activities that you can do so that people can think and reflect upon. All right. In this context, it's optional. I can just tell you that maybe with my NCOs, I want them to do think, pair, share. I break you in the breakout rooms, like what we have been doing in this NCO course, and get them to share amongst each other. Very importantly, the next step, which is a step that will go over and over and over again during a debrief, is the 3-step questioning that I've been emphasizing. So this is the main bulk of debriefing, okay? It happens not once. It happens all the time, okay? It happens all the time. It happens all the time because as a facilitator, you're going to ask questions to facilitate the learning process. And when I ask a question, of course, you can use the tool that I was sharing about to get them to answer the question. Very importantly, when you're conducting this, you want to make sure that, you know, participants share, and this is where you use the tool. Also importantly is that you want to make sure that the discussion remains on track, right? You don't want them to start talking about this and then they go on about another activity. For example, today in this scenario that we're doing a bleeding wound lesson, right? Maybe someone mistakenly say that, in bleeding wounds you see blisters, and then the topic suddenly becomes to this: how do I conduct burns lesson, but blister is only second degree burns, and maybe it could be in a third degree burn. I don't know. And then that is like off topic, right? Today we are talking about bleeding wound. Suddenly the discussion about burns. That's what we don't want to happen, because that's not relevant to whatever we are saying today. So as a facilitator, when we are going through this 3-step questioning, it's very possible that we go off track. And as a facilitator, you want to make sure that we remain on track. Okay. So 3-step questioning, I've already went through with you what each question means, and I'm going to go through with you in details here. So the first step to this is, as I've said, recalling a certain experience. What happened? To do this, we ask 2 types of questions. They are not exclusive, but they are very similar in nature. We ask fact and feeling-finding questions. We ask questions like, what happened? How do you feel? What was memorable? What do you think went well? Okay. So these are basically questions that trigger people to think of what they have just done. I say again, these are questions that trigger people to think what they have just done and what they have just gone through, what they have just experienced. Okay. And when we ask feeling-finding questions, we also uncover many things like opinions, their feelings about certain things that happen to them, values and beliefs. Okay, so for example, in a debrief with my Sec 2s, I'm going to ask them, how do you think you performed today? Right? What do you think went well with the activity today? What do you think, what is one thing that you did not like about the activity today? And then the Sec 2 may reply me, oh, sir, I think that today my explanation was not very well done. Or the person may reply me, oh, sir, I think that today we were very well prepared for the lesson. Okay, so those are events that happen. Those are concrete things that have happened. Now we're going to ask consequence finding questions. Remember, we want to know, what does this mean for us? Why did it happen? Okay, we want to discover the underlying causes of behavior. And questions in this case will be like, okay, so you mentioned that you think that today went well. Why do you think that happened? Okay, we are digging deeper, right? Just now we were here at the surface level. Now we are going to dig a layer deeper. Why? So what? How is this relevant to us? What does it mean for us? Okay, so if taking an example of, so I think I did well today, then we're going to ask them why. And then the person will be like, oh, I think today my explanation was very clear. Okay, then we're going to ask again, why? Why do you think your explanation was very clear? And the person, then your Sec 2 might reply, oh, I think I was very systematic. My structure was well done. And that's because I prepared well for the lesson. All right. So just think about what just happened. We went from, I think the lesson has went well today, to that's because my explanation is good, to that's because I prepared well for the lesson. You see, now we are digging, now we are finding out the underlying reason of why we are observing a certain phenomenon. Okay, I repeat, now we are uncovering the underlying reason of why we are observing a certain event or certain phenomenon. That's step 2. And that's the power of asking questions, right? And finally, after we have did that layer, we want to know what's next. Okay, so we ask, tell me more kind of questions. We want to discuss the learning points. We want to discuss how can we improve or do the same in the future. Questions will be like, how do you think you can do better? What other scenarios do you think this applies to? How can you grow as a leader using what you have learned? So using the same example as just now, the last answer I got was, so I think I prepared well, I prepared sufficiently well today. Then my question back will be like, okay, so what does this tell you about preparation? How does this link to you as an NCO to be? And then the possible response will be like, oh, it shows that good preparation will help me do my job well as an NCO. And that is something that I want to do in the future as an NCO. So now we are at the depost level that we hope to be at. So from a phenomenon or from an observation that the lesson went well, we learned that preparation is useful and beneficial for our NCO. Okay, just by asking a few questions. Just by asking a few questions, we can get someone to come to the realization of doing something leads to a certain consequence. Okay, and that basically is what facilitation is about. That's what a debrief is about. We're trying to learn that actions have consequences. We're trying to learn that we're trying to learn about what causes things happen, and that's basically what we are doing here as a facilitator. Okay, anyone lost at what I'm saying? If you're lost, raise your hand. Feel free, type in the chat. Or if you understand what I'm saying, please type in the chat. Or give me a thumbs up or nod your head. Understand? Just type yes, why, good, whatever. There's no show off. I'm gonna say that I understand. Thank you, Flanders. I expect you to understand. If not, you cannot do your job. Thank you, Wen. Cannot see your full name. Wen Kai, Wen Kang. That is on my screen just stops at KA. I'm so sorry. Okay, thank you for your responses, everyone. Very good. So, a common theme that when we are asking questions is that people might give you very ambiguous answers, right? And I'm pretty sure you have experienced this yourself. When you are in a breakout room and your facilitators ask you, so how do you think the activity went? 99% chance you'll say, sir, ma'am, I think that was good. 99% chance you say, I think that was interesting. I think that was quite meaningful. Okay. So, what in the world does good, interesting, meaningful mean? It doesn't mean anything. It means that you give me an answer that is not an answer. Okay. Right. We want to understand why. We want you to share. Okay. What exactly do you find interesting? What exactly do you find meaningful? And most of the time, you probably have already experienced this. Your facilitator will ask you back, so what do you find interesting? Why do you say it's interesting? Okay, because we want to probe, we want to poke you for that particular event that you think was interesting. Just as in the example I gave just now. So I think the lesson went well. My next question immediately was, so why do you think it went well? What went well? This is clarifying ambiguous words so that we really understand what's going on with the people we are trying to debrief. Okay? Next thing is, when I ask you what went well, why do you think it was interesting? This is an open-ended question. Okay? It's an open-ended question because we don't want people to just say, yes, correct. That's exactly what I want to say. Because most of the time, sometimes it's not, right? Sometimes it's just convenient and easy to understand, to answer that. In the slide here, I give an example. Do you think you can manage your time more efficiently? 99% chance the answer is yes, right? People ask you this kind of question, you dare to say no, man. No, right? Your parents ask you, you know you're wrong or not. You confirm say yes or not, you will say no, man. Cannot be. So it's the same line of thinking here, right? When we are asking questions, you want to be open-ended. You don't give them the answer, because you give them the answer, they'll just go with the most politically correct answer, right? We want to prompt them. We want to get them to answer whatever they're thinking. So ask more open-ended questions. Why do you think that was good? I want to ask questions like, why? Do you think your explanation was good? Okay? Because that fits them an answer that they will be inclined towards. Right? So 2 points about 3-step questioning when you're asking questions. First, don't just take whatever answer that you get for it. Okay? Always probe deeper until you get what you want. Second is, while you're probing, don't suggest an answer for them to give you. Right. Finally, when we're done, we will recall whatever we have just went through during a discussion, summarize how these learning points will basically help us grow as a person, help us manage conflict, something that we have just been through with Tony sir. We will talk about like for follow-up actions. For example, a follow-up action in my scenario was that, next time I'll prepare for my lessons well. That in itself is a follow-up action. I will always remember to go and do that next time. That is a something that you want to highlight. And of course, you want to record it down. It might not be you, it might be getting your junior to do it, writing it down in their notebook, in their journal, so that they have some form of reference as to what they have just went through today. Okay. So just very briefly, during the debrief, we need to always keep our objectives in mind. When we are asking questions, like I said, we must make sure that the topics stay on track. So we need to make sure that the discussion stays focused, right? And of course, in order for you to do that, in order for you to ask the right questions, you need to be involved. You cannot be on your phone, you cannot be scrolling Instagram or TikTok while your participants are talking, because then you won't be listening. And then you don't listen, you cannot ask questions. And very importantly, we must let our participants express their views. And as part of making it a conducive environment, we don't force our views onto people, right? We don't force our views onto people. I don't say that like chicken rice is the best dish on earth, and I make every one of you agree with me. Chicken rice is the best dish on earth. No, right? I will explain to you. Chicken rice is nice because it tastes like chicken. It's yummy. The chili is good. I put soya sauce is nice. I can eat breast meat or thigh meat, blah, blah, blah. So that in itself is explaining, but I'm not making you agree with me, okay? I'm convincing you to agree with me, but I'm not making you agree with me. There's a difference in that. All right. So now we're going to go through facilitation in our small groups level. Small group level, yeah. Let's take about